Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. We are at the political roundtable with some of the top stories of the week, and there are quite a few. Those stories include President Trump threatening to take over the District of Columbia again, the latest on Ghislaine Maxwell, Jeffrey Epstein saga, Sean Diddy Combs asking for a pardon, the Texas redistricting controversy, the final RFK Stadium vote. Maybe, just maybe, we'll get to the Trump tariffs. Just maybe. My guests are Dr. Niambi Carter, University of Maryland Professor of Public Policy, Dr. Marcus Board Jr., Howard University Professor of Political Science, and Democratic strategist Douglas Sloan. Thank you all so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let us talk about the thing that is literally happening today. DC residents can expect to see federal law enforcement presence around the city today, possibly tomorrow. All of this part of the response to help curtail crime in the district. Of course, all of this after a 19-year-old former DOJ staffer was attacked in Logan Circle on Sunday. There have been 2 arrests, but this is the second time this week that the president has threatened a federal takeover of D.C. if local leaders do not address the crime issue. And earlier today, U.S. Attorney for the district, Jeanine Pirro, talked about that during a press conference.
You know, my understanding is that both the Trump administration as well as the Metropolitan Police Department are looking to increase law enforcement efforts because of the violence we're seeing across this country, across this city. I'm not sure specifically what you're referring to, but we just have too much crime. But, you know, young people are coddled, and they don't need to be coddled anymore. They need to be held accountable. They shouldn't be going to arts and crafts in family court. They need to understand that enough is enough, and that the D.C. Council has to repeal some of these absurd ordinances and laws that they've had passed that do nothing to protect the people of this city. And
Doug, let me start with you. Your reaction to this latest news and Pirro's comments.
Yeah, I think this is just a lot of bluff and bluster coming from President Trump. He cannot, via presidential edict, take over the District of Columbia. He would have to go through Congress to do that, and they don't have a supermajority in the Senate. Democrats would block that. So this is just Trump making some noise to try to throw some red meat bits to his base, and maybe also try to distract from the Epstein saga, which the MAGA world is simply not letting go of. But you know, it's really interesting because crime is actually down 26% in DC this year. So he's really making a lot of noise over something that he can't do anything about.
You know, one of the interesting things is that when he made his first threat of the week on Tuesday, he made it at the same time that Jeanine Pirro was at a National Night Out event talking about the fact that crime was down. Niambi, excuse me, your thoughts about what she said. And let me ask you specifically, do you believe that if Mayor Muriel Bowser was a man, that he would not make these threats?
I don't think that's the case. I think the fact of the matter is DC, despite its changing demographics, still is a majority Black city. And I think that it irks him in a particular kind of way. I definitely think he does probably take more of a strongman approach with a woman. But I mean, I think Donald Trump is a bully more generally, and this just is more of that. The fact of the matter is, this is not about crime. Because if it was about crime and crime prevention, then you would do things that we already know help curb crime, like, you know, give people things to do, make sure there's employment opportunities, make sure people have a way to move through their city. The fact of the matter is, this was an attack that happened at 3 a.m. in Logan Circle. Most of the crime in this city that does occur crime happens east of the river in Ward 7 and 8, in parts of Ward 5, like Trinidad, Brentwood, where I used to live. So this isn't about crime prevention. This isn't about keeping people safe. This is about a sense that Black kids in particular, right, young adults in the city are out of control. And they're going to put those Black kids in prisons at younger and younger ages if they can help it. And because DC doesn't have a prison system of its own, that means these kids will be sent hundreds of miles away from home. Right. And so this isn't about accountability. This isn't about safety. This is not about any of that. This is more racist policy wrapped up in, you know, sort of this race neutral talk. But we know exactly what she's saying and what he's saying.
Marcus, do you think that this was the last straw because of who was attacked in Logan Circle? I mean, look, no one wants any kind of violence, assaults, what have you. Let's say that. But we've had very, very small children killed by, you know, stray bullets, and we've had all kinds of high profile, you know, homicides. But now we've got a 19-year-old former Doge employee, a white kid who was reportedly beat up, but he'll be all right.
Yeah, I'm more worried about who's going to protect us from Piro's outfit. That was hideous. But generally, just terrible. Like, who's going to protect us from that? But more seriously, they're always looking for new people to put in jail. Prisons are our big business, and we have to accept that. And they're a political opportunity to push people out, as Nyambi was saying. So I think this idea that, you know, a guy got robbed at 3:00, we don't, you know, people get robbed. It's a thing.
Right.
I would, you know, I'll go out on a limb here and say I would support cops in jails if it worked. It don't work. It doesn't diminish crime. It doesn't keep people safe. It doesn't protect people. The only thing it succeeds at doing is putting more Black people in jail, including kids. This is like the new frontier. Put kids to work. Put them in jail. Put them, you know, act like it's 1922, and let's get back to killing kids again, right? Like it doesn't work, and the only thing it succeeds at is making rich people more rich and poor people more poor. And you know, I think that the mayor should take her cues loosely. For the mayor in Baltimore, who is invested in city programming. I think that has been very effective. I think he has some areas that I would push back against too, but that approach works. Give young people jobs, give them opportunities, give them programs. But I mean, she's talking about people coddling kids, and that man behind her got that weird bow tie on. Like, it's just weird stylistically, and I can't get past it. I'm actually hung up on it right now.
But you know something, Doug, also, when you talk about the president's, you know, reaction and talking about doing something, lest we forget that Congress did not restore that $1.1 billion to the DC budget that was DC's money to begin with. And an argument can be made that that $1.1 billion could in one way, shape, or form impact public safety or programs or anything that could make the DC safer.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and as the earlier speaker said, the doctor from Maryland pointed out that, you know, to add to people's to ensure that people have something to do, to give them jobs, to give them job training, to make sure that people idle minds are the devil's workshop, to make sure that people are busier, to make sure that our kids have the education, have perhaps jobs to learn how to be an electrician, or jobs how to be a plumber, or jobs how to be job training on how to be a car mechanic. So a lot of that could go towards job training. A lot of that could go towards education. A lot of that could go towards, you know, even green jobs. So you bring up a very valid point when you were talking about, you know, where that money could go. Yes, absolutely. It could go to help to kind of bringing down the level of crime in the district by not only providing job training and education, but also by providing clean jobs that could be used in the district.
Mm-hmm. One final question about this, Nyambi, too, about the mayor. She did not respond after President Trump made the threat on Tuesday? She's not made any public comments, I should say. On yesterday, what would be the strategy for her to deal with this? Council Chairman Phil Mendelssohn said earlier this year not to poke the bear, even if the bear is doing the poking.
Well, I mean, I think the mistake people make is that you can appease Donald Trump. I mean, I think Donald Trump always wants to know how far he can push people, and he's always going to take more. There's never enough, right? Because we saw when he suggested about Black Lives Matter Plaza, how quickly that came down. But it doesn't stop there, right? Now it's, you need to change your criminal code. Now it's, we need to do more, right? We're going to have more enforcement of police, right? We want to sort of federalize the city, if you will. So it never is enough. I think responding to him at this point or not won't matter, right? Because this is Donald Trump's classic playbook. I think the thing people always think is they can appease him and they can negotiate with him. You can't. There's never enough. You cannot negotiate with this person. There is no negotiation, because what he wants, right, is to take over the city. And quite frankly, the cynical part of me says the reason that he's picking on the district right now has nothing to do with crime or any other thing, and everything to do with the amount of money that DC controls to be a relatively small place. And it would feel good to be able to take DC's taxes and take them for the federal government if he could. So the cynical part of me says this is a money grab. It has nothing to do with anything beyond that, because I don't think Donald Trump cares that much. I mean, he's a criminal. So you mean to tell me, pot meat kettle, that you want to tell me that you are so concerned about crime? And meanwhile, Jeannie Perry, you work for a criminal, right? This country is run by a criminal. So I don't all this hand wringing about crime in the district is it's just cover to do a lot of other more nefarious things.
Interesting. Look, we're going to start this conversation on this next topic. We'll have to continue it on the other side. But this Ghislaine Maxwell issue is not going away. And there had been reporting that there was going to be a dinner meeting with the Attorney General and the Vice President. And let's just listen to what the Vice President and the President said about it yesterday.
I saw it reported today, and it's completely fake news. We're not meeting to talk about the Epstein situation, and I think the reporter who reported it needs to get better sources.
Look, the whole thing is a hoax. It's put out by the Democrats because we've had the most successful 6 months in the history of our country, and that's just a way of trying to divert attention to something that's total bull.
So, Marcus, I'll start with you. I don't believe that the reporting was inaccurate. I think that, as is often the case, somebody's got good sources, and then they backed off. The Vice President and others backed off and said, we're not going to do this. But even more broadly, just what's your take on where we are with this Ghislaine Maxwell case? Because the president still has not said he would not pardon her. He's danced around it.
Yeah, no, I think it's grotesque, and I think it's hideous, the updates that they've made to the Oval Office. I think it's very ugly. I think the Vice President's eyeliner is also terrible. I don't know if it's really clear. You can see it from afar. The video don't even have to be clear. But no, it's just call the fashion police, truly. Maybe abolition isn't for everyone. No, Maxwell, she is another scapegoat. She's another person who they get to put up to the spotlight. Do I think he's going to end up pardoning her? Absolutely. No question, no hesitation. They're absolutely going to let that woman out of jail. Because that's what they do. That's his homie. And he, for whatever we want to say about Donald Trump and the way that he handles business, and how poorly he treats people that he's supposed to treat good, he sure is letting a lot of people out of jail. And they're going to do that here. I think the reporting is good. I think, media and journalism right now is under attack. And I'm not just talking about all the people getting assassinated in Gaza. I'm talking about real challenges to doing the work every day. And they have to be more on point now than they ever have. So do I think the reporting is right? Absolutely. Yeah, I think the reporting is right. Yeah, I think they met with that lady who's at her 5-star hotel of a jail, wherever she's at. And I don't know. It's still, all of this is still a big, opportunity or attempt to kind of divert our attention from all the terrible things that's going on, from, alligator Auschwitz or Alcatraz, if you want to call it that, to the Jeffrey Epstein stuff, to all of the money grab from colleges and universities and law firms and school. Like it's all a big kind of shell game where, you're trying to pick a card and figure out what the dealer, where he's hiding, the stone under the cups. But the reality is there is no stone. There's no win here. He's going to manipulate the system. He's going to get more rich. His friends are going to get more rich. He's going to leave office maybe. And then we're going to continue to struggle with these situations into the future. It's a bad time.
Hold that point, and I'll let everyone comment on the Ghislaine Maxwell issue. But we are going to take a break. Don't forget, you can hear this in every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation at the Political Roundtable. My guests are Dr. Neon B. Carter, University of Maryland Professor of Public Policy, Dr. Marcus Board Jr., Howard University Professor of Political Science, and Democratic strategist Douglas Sloan. Before the break, Marcus was talking about the Ghislaine Maxwell situation, and Doug, you were giving me the shaking my damn head. What were you thinking, Doug?
I were a betting man, and I am a betting man, actually. I would bet that he is going to end up pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell. And she is a convicted sex offender, pedophile, actually, which is, even worse than a sex offender. Well, the worst type of sex offender, rather. And it's incredible because his base was so amped up and hyper focused on this issue. They just knew that they were going to find a Democratic cabal of sex offenders and pedophiles in this Epstein list. And now he's coming up and saying there is no Epstein list. There's nothing there. And even his own followers in the MAGA base don't believe this. So he really has a problem regarding this issue. Technically, Ghislaine Maxwell was not eligible for a transfer to her new Club Fed prison in Texas, as a sex offender is not eligible to go to a minimum security prison like that. But she was granted a special waiver by the Trump administration to do so. So obviously, we're going to see some movement around Ghislaine Maxwell. And I really think that this is starting to create fractures within his base, because even those MAGA people now, and they're not the sharpest knives in the drawer, they're beginning to understand that they've been duped. He's lost Joe Rogan, lost a lot of the guys. They're not coming back.
Let me ask you this, Doug, from a political strategy point of view, even if one assumes that the MAGA base will let the president, they'll let him slide with anything. Is there a line where, when we're talking about the sexual assault, sexual molestation, sexual abuse, and trafficking of minors, that they will find just unacceptable? I mean, is there, if he were to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell, which, like Marcus said, I believe that is going to happen. May not happen tomorrow, may not happen next week, but I do believe that it may happen. Could be wrong. But is there a line, if that does happen, Doug, where somebody in the Republican strategy room says, now, wait a minute?
Well, I would like to think that line has been crossed, that Rubicon has been crossed, because remember, they have been laser-like focused on this Epstein list and trips to Epstein Island now for years. And some of the top perpetrators or the top offenders, or the people that are most focused on that, were Dan Bongino and Kash Patel. So it really makes them look like liars and undermines their credibility and Trump's credibility to say now that there is no list and there's nothing to see here and it's all made up by the Democrats. Like Joe Rogan said, what does he think? We think we're babies? Does he think we're children? Does he think we don't know or don't remember all of the things were said about this list and all the people that are supposed to be on this list? Just last week, me and my son went out to Comet Pizza to grab a pizza. The same place where one of those MAGA nutcases went with a gun and demanded to be taken to the basement to save the children that were being sex trafficked by Hillary Clinton. And of course, if you've ever been to Comet Pizza, you know there's no basement. So if not now, when? This is it. Yeah. They have got to come to their senses and understand that Trump is a con man and he's been conning them all along.
I don't eat pizza. Do they have wings? Because I love.
Yeah, they do. Yeah,
okay, maybe I'll give it a try. But Niambi, again, same question to you. There has to be a line. I'm talking about as it relates to decency for the people who do support the president, because the people who support the president, do have or have had or obviously have been children. Okay, they have had daughters, they have nieces, they have sisters, and what impact and what do you think will happen if that happens? Do you think that the victims will come out in mass?
Well, look, these people don't like women. Let's start there. So it doesn't matter if they have wives, children. I mean, like daughters. I mean, our president is a civilly convicted of sexual assault, and he's a father of a daughter, right? So like of two daughters, right? So, and he's had multiple wives. Doesn't like women. So being in relationship to a woman or proximity to a woman doesn't mean you like them. Most importantly, these people don't care about children. They don't care if they're sexually assaulted. They don't care if they're shot down at school. They don't care if they get drowned in a flood that could have been alerted to. They don't care about children. So all of this hand-wringing about pedophiles and child sex trafficking, they don't care about that. That was something to say. That story about, like you said, about the pizza shop. A woman in Canada came up with that. It was John Podesta and Hillary Clinton who were supposed to run this child sex ring. Didn't stop people from believing it at the time. And there are people who still believe it. And even though we know Jeffrey Epstein assaulted numerous girls, that man was still able to call his friends in very high places all around the world. I cannot believe for 1 second that a country that won't invest in feeding children will care much about whether they were sexually assaulted and abused. And we have to remember the victims in the Epstein case, at least, some of them did come forward. One of them killed herself. Right. I'm sure not just because of this moment, but the amount of difficulty these young women and now grown women have had in trying to reconcile what happened to them, and the fact that they were being abused, the fact that these men were like Epstein, because he had enough power, enough money, were basically given slaps on the wrist. I mean, it almost makes it seem like, what is the point? And that's what a lot of people who face sexual assault, not just women, say over and over and over again. They become the victims. I mean, they become victimized again because the public says, well, you should have known better. What were you doing over there? You were too fast. Yeah, you were 14, but you should have known better. Yeah, you were a grown woman and he was a rich man and you loved him, but you shouldn't have let yourself be dragged down so low, right? Preach. So we still find a way to make it everyone else's fault, but the person who actually perpetrated the crime. And I think that's the larger problem. So whether we see the Epstein files, I mean, do we need to read them to know that water is wet? We know it's nasty stuff in there. We know that's there. And we know our president, along with a lot of other powerful men, were in relationship to him. Were they molesting women? We don't know, but we do know that this was their friend and they spent time with them.
Am I just too pie in the sky to think that we could see some movement like we saw with the Me Too movement with this, and that just like the woman who uh, took her own life in this past spring, one of those victims, and we have seen one or two others. But what if there are, like the Me Too movement, dozens and hundreds that kind of come out, Marcus? Is it possible to see that wave of voices overwhelm this situation and really have everybody pay even more attention to this?
I wish that were the reality we lived in. I wish a group of people could organize around their collective experience to advocate for themselves, to speak out, to be heard, and for change to happen. That is not the world that we live in. And the reality is that we need people in those situations. We do need them to organize. We do need them to coordinate their interests. We need them to be connected to support one another. But the reality is the only real comprehensive legislation this country has ever passed focused on protecting women in particular. Violence against women was the Violence Against Women Act. And all it really did was put people in jail sometimes who couldn't afford to get themselves off. It's just that who could not afford to get out of jail. So I think this idea that we actually care about survivors, that we care about children, that we care about people who are in need, that we care about vulnerable people, I think completely misunderstands everything that disability that folks who have been fighting back against patriarchy have been saying, everybody that's been fighting back against racial injustice have been saying, about class warfare have been saying. We don't care about people who have needs. We just don't, and don't have the means to protect themselves. We are not in that country. And the sooner we come around to that reality, the sooner we'll be able to actually support one another and fight a little bit more tough. Because that's one of my big issues in this moment, is that sometimes we fight as if things should go our way because they're the right things, right? We think that the moral arc of history bends towards justice, and we are wrong. That was a hopeful proposition, and that's something that we can do for ourselves. But it's not something that we can will into reality. Donald Trump exists in that office right now because there's a backlash to Me Too, because there's a backlash to the movement for Black Lives, because there's a backlash to people who are trying to get more fairness and equity in the system. They exist because of it. The fact that they exist in contradiction makes them no different than the rest of us. What makes them different than the rest of us is they have the power to get what they want.
Yeah. Let me move on to yet another pardon story. Hip hop mogul Sean Diddy Combs, he is looking for a pardon from President Trump, but now it doesn't appear that he's going to get it. As we know, he was convicted last month of 2 charges of transportation to engage in prostitution after this really long trial. His attorney, Nicole Westmoreland, told CNN earlier this week that the music mogul's team has contacted Trump about a potential pardon.
Yes, it's my understanding that we've reached out and had conversations in reference to a pardon.
President Trump, when he was asked about this pardon, he said, quote, "I was very friendly with him. I got along with him great, and he seemed like a nice guy. I didn't know him well, but when I ran for office, he was very hostile." And the president indicated that a pardon is likely not on the table because of that break in his relationship with Mr. Combs years ago. How is he feeling now about the chances of a pardon given the president's commentary?
I think that Mr. Combs is a very hopeful person, and I believe that he remains hopeful.
Oh, to that point, Trump has acknowledged to Newsmax that he is leaning against a pardon, and he mentions what the reporter was just referring to, in that Combs was hostile when he was running. Your thoughts about this, Doug, and even the possibility or the conversation about a Sean Diddy Combs pardon?
It's an interesting take. he might, and this is just me spitballing at this point, he might try to tie this into the Ghislaine Maxwell pardon. If people are very much against his base and everyone else are very much against him pardoning Ghislaine Maxwell. So he might, do a little pump fake towards Ghislaine and pardon Puffy Combs, and people wouldn't be that upset about a pardon for Puffy Combs, given everything that went down with his trial in comparison to a pardon for a convicted pedophile in Ghislaine Maxwell. So it's kind of interesting. There is a little play there in that you're looking at two convicted felons for similar crimes. Trump may try to, pull a fast one and mix and match with the pardons here. But, if he has any sense, he'll stay as far away from both of them as humanly possible.
You think so, Marcus?
It's funny you said got any sense. You said earlier, Doug, about them not being the sharpest knives in the drawer. I think they might not be the sharpest bowling balls if it's just me talking. I don't know. Maybe a melted Crayola. I don't know, a crayon or something. Anyway, yeah, these aren't sensible times, right? So, and pardons, frankly, have never been, a reasonable measure. It's somebody with enough power to say, hey, you get to get off because you're my friend and I'm going to let you out. Do I think Diddy's going to get pardoned? I don't know. He's a trifling trash man, and everything he got, he probably deserved 10 times more. But the big difference between Diddy and Maxwell, in my estimation, is that Diddy was caught on tape beating on that girl. Like he had no sense. So, I think in the Trump world, I think a large part of what he does relies on this idea of no face, no case, right? Like if you've been seen doing this thing, that's why that Access Hollywood tape got disappeared so fast. Because it's like, well, they caught me on tape talking some mess and calling. So yeah, I think in Diddy's case, getting caught on camera is probably, the nail in the coffin for him. But stranger things, they're gonna flip DC and take away home rule. They're gonna turn the jails inside out and put black kids in there like George Stinney all over again, 14-year-old who got executed. They're gonna do whatever they want. And this idea that there's gonna be a rhyme or reason or order to it, I think is sweet. This is a sweethearted to think that they're gonna do it in some type of order we can predict. That ain't what they do. They do what they want. Yeah. What bullies do. Bullies with power.
Nyambi?
Look, I mean, these people, to Marcus's point, are agents of chaos. That's what they do. They spread chaos, disorder, pestilence, and they want us to keep us dumb, sick, and tired, so we stop paying attention to all of the things.
Period.
If he lets Puffy go, I don't think it'll make one iota of difference. I mean, this is the man who let almost 1,600 people go after January 6th. So, I mean, I feel like Donald Trump doesn't really have any particular moral compass that's guiding him. He said what he said. Not that this man committed terrible crimes, but he wasn't nice to me. And that is the sort of metric for everything that Donald Trump does. He is a petty, capricious man. And, woe to us, right, who are sort of at his whims on any particular day. And look, I think we also know this man likes money. And so I am imagining, I don't know, it could be, but I could imagine a universe where a very large sum of money makes it to somebody's election campaign, re-election campaign, or there's something another, their pet project. And miraculously, all of those old feelings get put aside and Sean Puffy Combs becomes a citizen again in the world. So, I mean, I don't think this man responds to too much except his own ego and his own wallet. So I'm sure Puffy still has some money. He still has some change in them couch cushions. So if we find out that he's out, I am imagining money will appear somewhere to some cause that this administration or their friends cares about. And that's allegedly, right? That's theory of what could happen. But I don't think all is lost for Puffy.
Yeah, well, we'll have to watch that. Nyambi, I did want to continue with you as we move to this Texas redistricting issue. This is a fascinating fascinating story. All of it, of course, happening, with the backdrop of the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, and and everything else. What's your take on it without getting too much into the weeds? Because a lot of people still don't really understand gerrymandering. They don't know whether it's spelled with a G or a J. And but your take on what this means for democracy, not just in Texas, but nationwide.
Me? Oh, I'm sorry. Well, listen, look, I think Texas Democrats are going to have to use everything that they have in their bag. And right now, the only thing that they have is restricting the vote by not denying the quorum. And so leaving the state was their best bet. I mean, Republicans did it. The Republicans just did it to keep Ghislaine Maxwell right from talking to the DOJ members. So like, I don't know why they're acting like this is some crazy strategy that never has been seen before. It's a very common strategy. And I imagine it's going to be used more often as the parties become more antagonistic to each other. And it's not as if any party is pure and one is not. This is what happens when you allow partisan gerrymanders. And in this particular case, when you have a governor and a president that are in lockstep, and when the president told him to find him them votes, he did what he could do. And that's why Republicans 20 years ago were looking at state houses and looking at gubernatorial races. They said, you can have the presidency, but if we can win these state legislators, then we can redraw the districts and make sure that we stay in power and we are overrepresented in these states' legislatures. That's what you're seeing in Tennessee, Texas. You're seeing all around the South. But you're also going to see it on the Democratic side, possibly in a state like Maryland, potentially in California and other places, because people are going to take a note out of this book. So our democracy has been on life support for a really long time. We've only ever really had a true democracy between 1966 and 2013-ish, give or take. And I think that was that was being very generous to call it that. So now that the Voting Rights Act is gone and you have these really empowered activist state legislatures, I mean, we got something. I don't think you can call it a democracy. We can vote, but it's not a democracy. And I think to Marcus's point, as soon as we're clear about that, then we can do some other things.
Doug, what do you say?
Well, she brought up a very good point in terms of, the Democrats are going to have to fight fire with fire here. We're going to see if Texas does go through with this plan. We will see retaliation on the Democratic side by some of the larger blue states that have a hell of a lot of people in them. California, New York, and Illinois, and maybe even Maryland. I don't know if Westmore is going to try to make a move like this, considering that he wants to run for president in the next term. But it's all well within the rules of war. This is not the Democratic Party of 2016 that is cowed by Trump and isn't going to be retaliatory. This is a party that recognizes the very real existential threat that Trump represents and is ready to meet him and the Republicans on the field of battle, because we know that our democracy is at stake. Whatever little of it is left is at stake right now. I mean, Trump is taking steps. I mean, it's really just FUBAR all around. Trump is taking steps in terms of with the tariffs, in terms of trying to what he's doing with immigration and custom enforcement is criminal. They're just snatching people off the streets that are American citizens. He really is testing the very limits of our democracy. And the Democrats are the last line of defense. So we have to fight back in every battle, on every stage, on every front, to try to essentially ride this one out until this guy is out of office or something else happens to him. And I'm not advocating that, by the way.
Marcus, real quick, because I want to make sure we get to this RFK Stadium vote question. Your thoughts about the Texas situation first, real quick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Doug and Niambi. I did a video on WHUT's Instagram. I do some work there about this situation. I think in the sense that the Democrats are the last line of defense in the same way that Drake is the last line of defense for hip hop, right? It's a wrap. The loss is real. It's not happening. I think what's happening in Texas is interesting, but I think the bigger point is that this has been happening for some time. I think Niambi made that very clear. This has been happening for some time. This is one of the intentional strategies from the Democratic Party to make majority-minority districts. They're very intentionally shifted. There is no clear way to draw district lines that is quote unquote fair. It's always going to be biased with some type of ideology, whether it's saying you want certain people to have, if you want to draw around community lines, if you want to draw it around partisan lines, if you want, there's always going to be some bias. And the question is, how do you navigate that? But I think, it's something, to Niambi's point, that the Republican Party has been doing and preparing for years, and the Democratic Party is always late to the party. They're always reactionary. They're always coming in second in a race where the first is all that matters, right? I don't remember who won second in the 100-meter dash. I don't remember who won second in the NBA Finals. I don't remember who won the second in the MVP voting. I do remember who came first, and they come second far too often, and they concede too often, and they just don't know how to fight. They some punks. Yeah.
I appreciate the Drake reference. I was thinking you were saying the last line of defense for light-skinned Canadian hip-hop artists.
Period. Exactly. The Democratic Party, the Democratic Party is a light-skinned Canadian with ab etching. Yeah.
So real quick, because I only have about maybe about 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the most. RFK Stadium vote passed the first vote. There were some changes. Next one coming up in September. Niambi, do you think it's going to happen? What do you think are the long-term repercussions of this if it passes?
I think it probably will happen. I think the neighbors in the neighborhoods around that stadium are going to be severely impacted, whether people get priced out of their homes, dislocated from their communities, not to mention what the environmental impacts are going to be. We're going to see increases in traffic. I mean, it's already a tight area there. So it's going to be a lot going on for there. And I know they said they're going to make some affordable units, but if you're talking about 30% out of 5,000 or 6,000 housing units, we're not talking about enough to actually put a dent in the affordable housing crisis. Now, the other part of this, I think that we have
go ahead.
PG County is going to be left with a big hole in the ground. So all of these concessions given to these people never pay off for the locality. So I tell DC residents to tread lightly here. Giving all of this money to these people to build this stadium is not going to be the boom that they think it might be.
30 seconds, Marcus. RFK, what do you say?
Yeah, one good thing that's going to come out of it is you're not going to have to drive all the way around the stadium to get on 295 anymore. So that's going to be good. Other than that, in Chicago, where the Obama Center is going, they have a community benefits agreement that they're trying to get him to sign to make sure that people aren't pushed out of the neighborhood. They're also trying to do that work here at RFK, and it's an uphill battle, but we need people to be fighting it. Are they going to get what they want? Of course, rich people get what they want. The question is, do they have to be comfortable when they get it? And I think that's up to us to decide whether or not we can, make sure that their breakfast tastes a little weird today.
Doug, last 30 seconds, buddy.
I'm not in favor of $1 billion in city money as a $1 billion giveaway to billionaires when they could pay for this stadium out of their own pockets without any significant dent to their bank accounts. DC is struggling. DC right now, unemployment is on the rise. They're expecting a population shrink. Washingtonians are spending less. Layoffs are mounting. We're really suffering in terms of what Trump is doing with all the Doge cuts. So I'm not in favor of a $1 billion giveaway right now for a football stadium to billionaires. So I'm on record as being against the deal as it currently stands.
I want to thank all of you all for participating in this conversation. Dr. Niambi Carter, Dr. Marcus Board, Democratic strategist Doug Sloan. Thank you all so very, very much. That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, August 7th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.